The heavy oak door swung open before Daria Volkov could knock, revealing a room that smelled of expensive leather and darker secrets. Two identical faces turned toward her simultaneously, and for a disorienting moment, she couldn't distinguish predator from predator. "Miss Volkov," the one seated behind the mahogany desk said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "You're late." Daria straightened her spine, refusing to show the tremor in her hands. "Your text said 8 o'clock. It's 7:59. The standing twin. She could see now that his tie was loosened, while the seated ones remained perfectly knotted. Laughed, a sound that seemed genuinely delighted. "Roman, she's got fire. I like her already." "Ruslan, close the door." Roman's eyes never left Daria's face. Pale gray irises that seemed to catalog every flicker of fear, every calculated breath. "Miss Volkov, do you know why you're here?" She knew, of course. Had known since the moment 3 days ago, when her boss, Mikhail Fedorov, disappeared without a trace, leaving his office stripped bare and his personal effects gone. Had known when the HR department suddenly had no record of his employment. Had known when the severance package appeared in her bank account with a note that simply read, "Keep silent, stay safe." But Mikhail had made one mistake. He'd left behind a laptop, hidden in the false bottom of his desk drawer, and Daria had found it before anyone else could. What she'd discovered on that encrypted drive had led her here, to this restaurant's private room, to these two men who looked like fallen angels dressed in three-piece suits. "I believe," Daria said carefully, "that this is about the discrepancies in the Volkov-Ivanov investment accounts. The ones my former employer was supposed to present to you tonight." Roman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those cold eyes. Approval, perhaps, or calculation. "And you decided to come in his place. Brave or foolish?" "Necessary." Daria set her briefcase on the chair beside her, not sitting until invited. "The presentation was scheduled. The clients, you, were expecting answers. I'm a professional. I do my job." "Even when that job," Ruslan said, moving closer with the fluid grace of a panther, "might get you killed." This was the moment. The precipice. Daria could lie, could pretend ignorance, could play the terrified accountant who'd stumbled into something beyond her understanding. But these men hadn't survived in their world by falling for simple deceptions. The laptop had told her enough about the Popov brothers, Roman and Ruslan, the twin heads of the most powerful Bratva family in Moscow. They valued loyalty, efficiency, and above all, brutal honesty. "Mr. Popov," she said, looking directly at Ruslan, then turning to Roman. "And Mr. Popov, I know who you are. I know what you are. And I know that Mikhail Fedorov has been stealing from you for the past 18 months, filtering money through shell corporations in Cyprus and the Cayman Islands. Approximately 43 million rubles, if my calculations are correct." The silence that followed felt alive, dangerous. Roman's fingers steepled beneath his chin, a gesture that would have seemed professorial, if not for the violence implicit in his stillness. Ruslan had stopped moving entirely, his body coiled like a spring. "You calculated this," Roman said finally, "from Fedorov's laptop." "Yes. And you brought this information to us instead of running to the authorities. Or running, period." Daria allowed herself a bitter smile. "The authorities? You mean the ones on your payroll?" "I may be an accountant, Mr. Popov, but I'm not naive. Running would have been pointless. You would have found me. This way, at least I control the narrative," Ruslan whistled low. "Roman. She just admitted knowing about our police connections. She's either the smartest woman in Moscow or the most suicidal. Sit, Miss Volkov." Roman gestured to the chair across from him. "You've earned that much. Daria sat, grateful her knees didn't buckle. Now that she was closer, she could see the subtle differences between the twins. Roman's jaw was slightly harder, his shoulders broader by perhaps an inch. Ruslan had a small scar above his left eyebrow, and smile lines that his brother lacked. Roman was winter. Ruslan was the fire that burned beneath frozen lakes. "Tell me," Roman continued, sliding a folder across the desk. "What else did you find?" Daria opened the folder, her professional instincts taking over, despite the surreal danger of the situation. Inside were financial statements, transaction records, and photographs. Her photographs, taken over the past 3 days as she'd compiled her evidence. They'd been watching her. Of course they had. Fedorov created a network of false vendors, she began, falling into the familiar rhythm of analysis. Each one billing for services never rendered, products never delivered. The amounts were small enough not to trigger automated alerts, but consistent enough that over time, they accumulated significantly. He was clever, rotating the shell companies, never using the same one twice within 6 months, varying the amounts to avoid pattern recognition. "But you recognized the pattern," Ruslan said, now perched on the edge of the desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and woody. "I specialize in forensic accounting. It's what I do." Daria pulled out her own tablet, displaying the flowcharts and spreadsheets she'd created. More concerning than what he stole is where the money went. Fedorov didn't keep it. He was funneling it to someone else. Someone who wanted you weakened financially right before. She stopped, uncertain how much to reveal. "Before the Volkov territory negotiations," Roman finished, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You know about those too." It wasn't a question. Daria met his gaze steadily. "The laptop had emails. Fedorov was corresponding with someone using the alias Korol, King. They were planning something for next month's meeting with the Volkov family representatives. I couldn't decrypt most of the messages, but the implication was clear. This is bigger than simple embezzlement." Roman and Ruslan exchanged a look, one of those twin communications that happened without words. When Roman spoke again, his tone had shifted from interrogation to negotiation. "Miss Volkov, you've demonstrated remarkable initiative and even more remarkable courage in bringing this to us. You could have sold this information to our enemies. You could have disappeared with it as leverage. Why didn't you?" This was the question Daria had been asking herself for 3 sleepless nights. The honest answer was complicated, layered with pragmatism and something deeper she didn't want to examine too closely. She'd seen the photographs of the Popov brothers' charitable work, the hospitals they funded, the orphanages that bore their late mother's name. She'd read about the neighborhoods they protected, the businesses they kept alive, when others would have bled them dry. Yes, they were criminals, but they were criminals with a code, with loyalty to their own people. And if she was being truly honest with herself, there was something magnetic about them, something that had pulled her here despite every logical bone in her body screaming to run. "Because," Daria said slowly, "whoever is behind this won't stop with you. The Popov family controls half of Moscow's legitimate businesses. If you fall, thousands of people lose their jobs, their pensions, their futures. I grew up in one of your neighborhoods, Mr. Popov. My mother worked in a factory you protected from hostile takeover. When she got sick, your family's medical fund covered her treatment. I don't condone everything you do, but I understand loyalty and debt." Ruslan's expression softened. "You're paying back your mother's treatment? That was 8 years ago." "I don't forget kindness," Daria said simply, "even from unlikely sources." Roman stood, moving to the window that overlooked the Moscow skyline, the city lights reflecting in his eyes like captured stars. What you've done tonight, Miss Volkov, puts you in a precarious position, knowing you know too much to simply walk away, and we have too many enemies to trust that you'll remain silent. Fear spiked through Daria's chest, but she kept her voice level. What are you proposing? Work for us. Roman turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw something other than calculation in his face. Genuine interest. Not as a pawn or a prisoner, but as our chief financial officer. You'll have full access to our accounts, our holdings, our operations. Your job will be to find every leak, every betrayal, every weakness in our financial structure, and fix it. You're asking me to become part of your organization. Daria's mouth had gone dry. To cross a line, I can't uncross. We're offering you a choice, Ruslan corrected, his voice gentler than his brother's. 6 months. Work with us to root out this conspiracy and stabilize our holdings before the territorial negotiations. After that, if you want to leave, you walk away clean. New identity, new city, enough money to start over anywhere in the world, no strings, no threats. And if I refuse? Roman's smile was thin and sharp. Then we'll have to ensure your silence by other means. I'd prefer not to, Ms. Volkov. You're too valuable to waste. But understand this, you walked into our world tonight. There are only 2 ways out, on your feet or on your back. I'm giving you the chance to choose. Daria's mind raced. 6 months embedded in the Bratva. 6 months of danger, of moral compromise, of becoming something she'd never imagined. But also 6 months of the most challenging financial puzzle she'd ever encountered. 6 months of actually making a difference instead of just shuffling papers for corporate interests. And at the end, freedom. Real freedom. The kind money could buy. I have conditions, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Ruslan laughed again, that warm sound that seemed so at odds with his profession. Of course you do. Let's hear them. I want unrestricted access to all financial records, no exceptions. I want a secure workspace, not some back room where I'm constantly supervised. I want protection, real protection. Because if I'm right about this conspiracy, I'll have a target on my back the moment I start digging. And I want your word, both of you, that no one I care about will be touched because of this arrangement. My family, my friends, they're off limits. Done, Roman said, without hesitation. Ruslan will handle your security personally. You'll work from our headquarters, in an office next to mine. As for your family, they're already under discreet protection as of 2 days ago. We don't take chances with valuable assets. The casual revelation that they'd been watching her family sent a chill down Daria's spine, but it also confirmed what she'd suspected. They'd been planning this recruitment from the moment they discovered she had Fedorov's laptop. She'd never really had a choice. They'd just given her the illusion of one. But perhaps that was enough. 6 months, Daria agreed, extending her hand across the desk. Then I walk away, and you forget I ever existed. Roman's hand enveloped hers, warm and strong and absolutely certain. 6 months, Miss Volkov. Though I suspect by the end, you won't want to leave. Ruslan leaned close as he shook her hand next, his breath warm against her ear. Welcome to the family, Daria. Fair warning, we're very hard to quit. As Daria left the restaurant that night, a black car waiting to take her home with 2 armed guards she'd never asked for, but now couldn't refuse, she realized the truth. She'd walked into the Popov brothers' web entirely of her own volition, drawn by curiosity and pride, and the dangerous thrill of being seen, really seen, as more than just another nameless accountant. Roman's final words echoed in her mind as the car pulled away from the curb. "Never enter my office uninvited, Miss Volkov. That room is sacred, and I don't tolerate breaches of boundaries. If you need me, you knock. You wait. You're granted permission. Are we clear?" She'd nodded, understanding the subtext. In the pop-off world, there were rules, hierarchies, lines that couldn't be crossed without consequences. Roman was drawing the first boundary, establishing the power dynamic. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew yet, was that Daria had never been particularly good at following rules she didn't agree with. And she had a feeling that before these 6 months were over, she'd be crossing more than just the threshold of Roman Popov's office. The game had begun, and Daria Volkov had never walked away from a challenge in her life. She wasn't about to start now. The Popov headquarters occupied a converted factory building in Moscow's industrial district, a deliberate choice that spoke volumes about the brothers' approach to power. Where other Bratva families flaunted their wealth in gilded mansions and ostentatious displays, Roman and Ruslan had chosen functionality disguised as decay. From the outside, the building looked abandoned, its brick facade weathered and windows dark. Inside, however, was a fortress of steel and cutting-edge technology that would make most intelligence agencies jealous. Daria arrived at 7 in the morning, 2 weeks into her new position, carrying coffee she'd made at home and wearing her most severe business suit, armor of a different sort. The guards at the entrance knew her now, nodding respectfully as she passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each more sophisticated than the last. Retinal scan, fingerprint analysis, and finally a voice recognition system that Ruslan had programmed himself. Her office was exactly where Roman had promised, adjacent to his, separated by a thick glass wall that could be made opaque with the touch of a button. A power move, Daria had realized. He wanted to watch her work, to observe her methods, to ensure she wasn't secretly communicating with his enemies. She'd responded by keeping the glass transparent during business hours, working with deliberate precision where he could see every keystroke, every calculation. If he wanted surveillance, she'd give him nothing to surveil except excellence. The files Roman had granted her access to were staggering in scope. The Popov empire touched everything. Legitimate businesses like construction and shipping, gray area ventures like underground gambling and protection services, and darker operations she'd learned not to examine too closely. Her job was to follow the money, to find the patterns that revealed betrayal, and in 2 weeks, she'd already uncovered 3 more embezzlement schemes, 2 money laundering operations that violated the family's own codes, and 1 particularly clever fraud involving construction permits and city officials. Roman had listened to each report with that impassive expression she was beginning to recognize as his version of impressed. Ruslan had started calling her the Bloodhound, which she chose to take as a compliment. This morning, however, felt different. The building hummed with tension she could taste in the recycled air. Guards stood at attention with hands near their weapons. The usual morning chatter among the administrative staff was absent. Something had happened overnight, something significant. Daria had just settled at her desk, pulling up the latest shipping manifests, when her office door burst open without warning. She looked up to find Ruslan, his usually playful expression replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "Conference room, now." His voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. "Roman wants you there." She didn't ask questions, simply grabbed her tablet and followed him through corridors that seemed darker today, more oppressive. The conference room was on the building's top floor, a space she'd never been permitted to enter before. Inside, Roman stood at the head of a long table, surrounded by men she recognized from her research. The Popov captains, each one controlling a different aspect of the family's operations. And at the opposite end of the table, zip-tied to a chair and sporting a black eye, was Viktor Popov, the twins' cousin, their father's sister's son, a man who by all accounts should have been blood loyal to the family. "Miss Volkov," Roman said without preamble, "tell everyone what you told me this morning." Daria's mouth went dry. She hadn't told Roman anything this morning. She'd been planning to present her findings this afternoon, after triple-checking her data, because the implications were too explosive to risk being wrong about. But Roman's eyes were on her, demanding, and she understood. This was a test of her loyalty, her courage, her commitment to the truth regardless of personal cost. She activated her tablet, and the wall screen came to life with her meticulously organized evidence. "For the past week, I've been tracing the flow of money from Fedorov's shell companies. The trail led through 6 different countries and 12 different banks, each transaction carefully structured to avoid international reporting requirements. Last night, I finally cracked the final layer of encryption." She pulled up a bank statement, the account holder's name highlighted in red. Viktor Leonid Popov. The 43 million rubles Fedorov embezzled didn't disappear. They were transferred, in increments of less than 500,000 each, into accounts controlled by Viktor. But that's not all. Daria swiped to the next screen, her hands steadier than she felt. Viktor has been running a secondary operation, skimming profits from the family's protection contracts, falsifying inventory reports from the warehouses, and accepting bribes from the Volkov family to sabotage the upcoming territorial negotiations. The room exploded into angry voices, captains shouting over each other, hands reaching for weapons. Only Roman remained still, his eyes locked on Viktor with an expression that made Daria's blood run cold. "Lies!" Viktor spat, struggling against his restraints. "She's working for the Volkovs, can't you see? She shows up out of nowhere, and suddenly I'm accused of betrayal? This is a setup." "Is it?" Roman's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. The room fell silent. "Ruslan, show them the rest." Ruslan approached the screen, pulling up a new file, video footage from Viktor's own phone, recovered by their tech team overnight. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 days ago, or in a cafe Daria recognized as being in Volkov territory. On screen, Viktor sat across from a man whose face wasn't visible to the camera. But his voice was clear, unmistakable. "The girl is a problem. If she finds the Cyprus accounts before the meeting, everything falls apart. You need to handle her. Permanently." The man across from him, one of the Volkov captains, Daria realized with sickening clarity, nodded. "Consider it done. But you need to deliver on your end. We want the shipping routes, the warehouse locations, everything Roman thinks is secure." "You'll have it," Viktor said, his voice dripping with bitterness. "My dear cousins think they're untouchable, think they can keep me as a subordinate forever while they play kings. They're about to learn what happens when you underestimate family." The video ended. Viktor's face had gone ashen, all his bravado evaporating as he realized the depth of his miscalculation. These weren't just accusations he could talk his way around. This was proof, irrefutable, and damning. Roman walked slowly around the table, each step measured and deliberate, until he stood directly in front of Viktor. "You would have killed her," he said softly, and somehow that quiet tone was more terrifying than any shout. "An innocent woman, doing her job, and you would have had her murdered to protect your theft." "Roman, please." Viktor started, but Roman raised a hand, silencing him. "I trusted you. gave you opportunities, forgave your mistakes, treated you as the brother our fathers wanted us to be. And you betrayed not just me, not just Ruslan, but every man and woman who depends on this family for protection, for livelihood, for survival. Roman turned to his captains. You all know the law. The penalty for betrayal is death, but this is family. So we vote. Who stands for mercy? Daria watched, heart pounding, as not a single hand rose. Victor had gambled on blood loyalty and lost. Whatever he'd done, whoever he'd hurt in his quest for power, he'd severed those familial bonds beyond repair. Death, Roman pronounced, and Victor began to scream, pleading, promising information about the Volkovs, offering anything and everything in exchange for his life. Ruslan stepped forward, his usual warmth completely absent. Take him to the warehouse, make it clean. He's still blood, even if he forgot what that meant. Two guards hauled Victor from his chair, dragging him toward the door as he fought and begged. Daria forced herself to watch, or to not look away from the consequences of her investigation. She'd known this would happen, had understood that finding the truth would mean sentencing someone to death. But knowing it intellectually and witnessing it physically were entirely different experiences. The door closed behind Victor, his screams fading down the hallway. The captains began filing out, each one stopping to nod at Daria with a respect that felt heavy, earned in blood. When the room was empty, except for the three of them, she finally allowed herself to breathe. You did well, Roman said, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Approval, yes, but also gratitude. You could have brought this to me privately, could have asked me to handle it quietly. Instead, you presented it to the entire council, forced transparency, left no room for anyone to question your motives or methods. That took courage. Daria set down her tablet with shaking hands. I didn't want anyone to think I was manipulating you. The evidence had to speak for itself. It did. Ruslan moved to the windows, staring out at the Moscow skyline. But Victor was right about one thing. You are a problem, Daria. A problem for our enemies, which makes you invaluable to us. It also makes you a target. The Volkov captain mentioned handling me permanently, Daria said, her voice steadier than she felt. That threat doesn't end just because Victor's been caught. Roman crossed to the small bar in the corner, pouring 3 glasses of vodka despite the early hour. He handed one to Daria, one to Ruslan, keeping the third for himself. No, it doesn't. Which is why you're moving into our home. Tonight? Daria nearly dropped her glass. Excuse me? The penthouse. Top 3 floors of this building. Roman drained his vodka in one swallow. Ruslan and I live there. It's the most secure location in Moscow. 24-hour guard rotation, monitored elevators, reinforced walls, emergency exit protocols. You'll have your own floor, your own space, but you'll be under our direct protection. I have an apartment, a life outside of this. Even as Daria said it, she knew how hollow it sounded. Her life had become the pop-off organization the moment she'd walked into that restaurant 2 weeks ago. Ruslan turned from the window, and his expression was serious, almost gentle. You had an apartment. As of this morning, it's been compromised. We found surveillance equipment in your bedroom, your kitchen, your bathroom. Someone's been watching you, Daria. Someone who now knows you're the reason Victor's plan fell apart. The room tilted slightly. Her bedroom. They'd been in her most private space, watching her sleep, watching her dress, watching every vulnerable moment. The violation felt physical, nauseating. Who? She managed. We're still determining that, Roman said. But until we do, you're not safe anywhere, We can't control completely. Pack a bag. Our people will retrieve your essentials and sweep them for tracking devices. Everything else stays behind. Daria wanted to argue, to insist on her independence, her right to choose where she lived and how she existed. But the fear was real now, sharp and immediate. She'd seen Victor's face in that video, heard him casually order her death. There would be others like him, seen others who saw her as an obstacle to be eliminated. "Okay," she said quietly, "but I want it in writing. This is temporary, protective custody, not permanent imprisonment. The moment the threat is resolved, I go back to my own life." Roman's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Always negotiating. Fine. Ruslan will draw up the paperwork. In the meantime, you have work to do. The territorial negotiations are in 3 weeks, and we need to know every single financial weakness the Volkovs might exploit. Think you can handle that while living in enemy headquarters?" The challenge in his voice was deliberate, designed to spark her competitive nature. Daria recognized the manipulation and rose to it anyway. "I'll have a full report in 2 weeks. Every shell company, every hidden asset, every dollar they think they've hidden. You'll go into those negotiations knowing more about their finances than they do themselves." "Good." Roman moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Miss Volkov. My office is 2 doors down from your new bedroom. The rule still applies. Never enter uninvited. Emergencies accepted, naturally. But I'll know the difference between urgency and presumption." With that, he left, and Daria was alone with Ruslan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "He likes you," Ruslan said after a moment. "Roman doesn't give warnings to people he doesn't respect. Everyone else just gets punishment." Daria sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "I just helped sentence your cousin to death. I don't feel very likable right now." Ruslan sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Victor made his choices. You didn't force him to betray us, to steal from people who trusted him, to order your murder. All you did was reveal the truth. That's not a crime, Daria. In our world, it's a rare and precious gift." "In my world," Daria said softly, "accountants don't send people to their deaths." "No," Ruslan agreed. "In your world, accountants shuffle papers and cash paychecks and pretend not to see the corruption all around them. You're not in that world anymore. You're in ours. And in our world, truth is survival, and loyalty is everything." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Come on. Let me show you your new home. Fair warning. Roman's floor is all minimalist perfection and intimidating silence. Mine is organized chaos and very loud music. Yours will be whatever you make it. That's the deal with living with us. We give you space to be yourself, even when that self is hiding behind spreadsheets and defensive sarcasm." Despite everything, Daria found herself smiling. "Is that what I do?" "Constantly." Ruslan grinned, and just like that, the darkness of the morning lifted slightly. "But we like it. Makes you unpredictable. Keeps things interesting." As they walked toward the elevators, Daria caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. She looked different somehow, harder, more defined, like a photograph coming into focus. 2 weeks ago, she'd been Daria Volkov, forensic accountant, ordinary woman with an ordinary life. Now she was Daria Volkov, the bloodhound, the woman who lived in a fortress with 2 of the most dangerous men in Moscow, the woman who'd sent a man to his execution before noon. The elevator doors opened, revealing a corridor that led to a life she'd never imagined choosing, but somehow couldn't imagine refusing. Roman was right. She wasn't going to want to leave when the 6 months ended. Because despite the fear, despite the violence, despite every logical reason to run, she'd never felt more alive. Living with the Popoff brothers was an education in contradictions. Roman's floor was exactly as Ruslan had described, ruthlessly organized, decorated in shades of gray and black. Every surface clear, except for a single photograph of a woman Daria assumed was their late mother. He worked impossible hours, often hearing him moving through his space at 3 a.m, the clink of a glass suggesting whiskey accompanied his insomnia. Ruslan's floor was its opposite. Warm colors, overstuffed furniture, nor walls covered with art that ranged from classical to street graffiti. He cooked elaborate meals at odd hours, filling the ventilation system with the scent of garlic and herbs, and played music that ranged from classical piano to American rock to Russian folk songs. Daria's floor, sandwiched between them, became a reflection of her evolving identity. She'd started with the bare minimum: laptop, clothes, toiletries, but gradually added small touches. Books on financial law and fiction thrillers. A vintage samovar she found in a market, because tea from a machine felt wrong. Photographs of her mother, her sister, the life she'd put on pause. 6 weeks into her residency, she'd settled into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings began with coffee in Roman's office, reviewing overnight developments and planning the day's investigations. Afternoons were spent deep in spreadsheets and financial records, occasionally interrupted by Ruslan bringing food and distracting her with stories about growing up as a twin in the Bratva. Evenings varied. Sometimes strategy sessions with both brothers, sometimes quiet dinners, sometimes solitary work. While they handled the darker aspects of their business, she'd learned not to ask about. The territorial negotiations were now 3 days away, and Daria had compiled a dossier on the Volkov family finances that was, frankly, devastating. They were hemorrhaging money through bad investments, their legitimate businesses failing, their illegal operations undercut by smarter, leaner competitors. They needed the territory the Popovs controlled, specifically the port access and shipping routes, to survive the next fiscal year, which made them dangerous. Desperate men made desperate choices. It was late Thursday evening when everything changed. Daria was alone in her office, Roman and Ruslan having left an hour earlier for a meeting with their weapons supplier. She'd been so focused on a particularly complex series of offshore transactions that she didn't hear her door open, didn't sense the presence until a hand clamped over her mouth and something cold pressed against her temple. "Don't scream," a voice whispered in heavily accented Russian. "Don't move. You're coming with us." Training she didn't know she possessed kicked in. Roman had insisted she learn basic self-defense, had drilled her on what to do if captured. She went limp, making herself dead weight, and the momentary confusion gave her the split second she needed. Her hand shot out, slamming the panic button hidden under her desk, a direct alert to Roman and Ruslan's phones. Then the world exploded into violence. Her attacker cursed, dragging her toward the door as she fought, kicking, biting, using every dirty trick Ruslan had taught her during their sparring sessions. She managed to knock over a lamp, sending it crashing loudly, and her attacker struck her across the face hard enough that stars burst in her vision. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard pounding feet, shouts in Russian, and then gunfire. Her attacker shoved her to the floor, using her as a shield, and Daria found herself staring at Roman and Ruslan in the doorway, both with guns drawn, both wearing expressions of such cold fury that she barely recognized them. "Let her go," Roman said, his voice utterly calm, utterly lethal. "Let her go, and you die quickly. Hold her, and I promise you'll beg for death long before I grant it." The man holding Daria laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. The Volkovs send their regards. They said to tell you, the negotiations are canceled. They're taking what they want instead. Everything happened at once. The man's grip shifted, his gun moving from Daria's head toward Roman. She threw herself sideways, disrupting his aim. Ruslan fired, and the man fell, his blood hot and shocking against her skin. Then she was moving, pulled to her feet by Ruslan while Roman secured the body, checking for identification, his movements mechanical and efficient. Daria's legs gave out, adrenaline turning to shock, and Ruslan caught her, gathering her against his chest. "You're okay," he murmured, his voice shaking in a way his hands weren't. "You're okay. Daria, we've got you." But they didn't have her. None of them were okay. Because this wasn't just an assassination attempt. This was a declaration of war. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. The building went into lockdown, every entrance sealed, every guard on high alert. Roman's captains arrived, grim-faced and armed. Daria was checked by the family's doctor, bruised but unbroken, and installed in Ruslan's apartment because her floor was now a crime scene. She sat on his oversized sofa, wrapped in a blanket, despite the warmth of the room, while Roman paced and Ruslan made tea nobody would drink. "They knew you were alone," Roman said, speaking more to himself than to them. "Knew exactly when we'd be off-site. This was coordinated with someone inside our organization. Victor's dead," Ruslan pointed out. We eliminated that leak." Victor wasn't alone. Roman stopped pacing, turning to Daria. "You said he mentioned the Cyprus accounts. Did you find anything else in his communications? Anything that suggested other collaborators?" Daria forced her mind to focus, to push past the fear and function. This was what she did. She found patterns in chaos, meaning in numbers. "There were deleted files on his phone. Your tech team recovered fragments, but I haven't had time to analyze them fully. If there are other names—" "Do it," Roman said. "Now. I don't care if it takes all night. I need to know everyone who betrayed us before those negotiations happen." "The negotiations should be canceled," Ruslan argued. "After this, after they tried to kidnap Daria, we can't walk into a meeting like nothing happened." Roman's smile was sharp and terrifying. "Oh, we're not canceling. We're changing the terms. Daria, how much money can we pull from liquid assets in 48 hours? She calculated quickly. "Enough to cripple them, if we play it right. The Volkovs are overextended. If we simultaneously call in their debts, freeze their accounts through our banking contacts, and flood the market with cheap versions of their premium products, they'll be bankrupted within a week." "Do it," Roman said. "All of it. And Ruslan, I want extra security at the negotiation site. Triple what we planned. The Volkovs want war. We'll give them war. But it'll be fought with ledgers and lawyers, not bullets. We'll destroy them legally, financially, so thoroughly that their children's children will never recover." It was ruthless. It was brutal. It was exactly what Daria had been trying to avoid, becoming someone who weaponized her skills for destruction instead of discovery. But as she touched the bruise blooming on her cheekbone, felt the ache in her ribs where she'd hit the floor, she realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet or theoretical theft. These people had tried to take her, had been willing to kill her to protect their own interests. And Roman and Ruslan had come for her without hesitation, had shot a man dead to protect her. Loyalty, she was learning, was a currency worth more than money in this world. "I'll need access to the Eastern European banking network," Daria said, her voice steady. an authorization to move funds through the shell companies we control. This needs to look like market forces, not targeted attack. Roman nodded. You have it. Whatever you need. And I want a gun, Daria added, surprising herself. I want to learn to shoot, to protect myself. I won't be helpless again. Ruslan's expression softened. I'll teach you, starting tomorrow. They worked through the night, the three of them, building a financial assault so comprehensive that the Volkov family wouldn't know what hit them. Daria moved money, froze assets, activated sleeper contracts that would trigger automatically at dawn. Roman coordinated with his captains, positioning their people to take over Volkov territories the moment the family couldn't pay their protection obligations. Ruslan handled security, in fortifying their position against retaliation. By sunrise, the trap was set. The Popov family was ready for war. But something else had happened in those quiet hours. Working side by side, occasionally brushing hands as they reached for the same document, sharing coffee and dark chocolate that Ruslan produced from somewhere. Daria felt the shift in how Roman looked at her, not as an employee or an asset, but as an equal, a partner in this dangerous game. Felt the warmth in Ruslan's smiles, the protective way he positioned himself between her and the door, as if his body alone could shield her from future threats. She was falling for them, both of them. It was irrational, impossible, being completely inappropriate, given the power dynamics and the danger. And the fact that they were criminals who'd killed a man in front of her without hesitation. But emotions didn't follow logic, and Daria had never been good at denying the truth. The truth was that she felt safer with them than she'd ever felt alone. The truth was that working with their sharp minds and sharper ambitions made her feel challenged and valued in ways her legitimate career never had. The truth was that when Roman smiled, really smiled, not that professional mask he wore for the world, her heart did something complicated and wonderful. And the truth was that Ruslan's laugh made her want to find ways to hear it more, to be the cause of that joy. It's done, Roman said as the sun broke over Moscow, painting his office in shades of gold. The Volkovs are finished. They just don't know it yet. Daria leaned back in her chair, exhausted and exhilarated. The negotiations? We'll be their surrender, Roman confirmed. We'll offer them a choice. Sell us their territories at fair market value and retain some dignity. Or we continue the assault and take everything, including their family name. They'll sell. And then, Daria asked, after the negotiations, after the threat is over? It was the question none of them had addressed. Her 6 months were nearly up. Soon she'd have the freedom she'd negotiated, the new identity, the escape from this world. Soon she could go back to being ordinary Daria Volkov, accountant, living an ordinary life. Except she didn't want that anymore. Possibly had never wanted it, had just been too afraid to reach for something more. Roman met her eyes, and for the first time, his expression was completely unguarded. That depends on what you want, Daria. This started as a business arrangement. 6 months, then freedom. But I think we all know it's become something more than that. Ruslan moved closer, his hand finding hers. We're not good at sharing, as a rule. But with you, it feels right. The three of us, together. A team. A family. Daria's breath caught. They were offering her everything she hadn't known to want. Partnership, protection, belonging. But also danger. Moral compromise. A life lived in shadows. It should have been an impossible choice. It wasn't. I want to stay, she said softly. Not as an employee. Not as someone under protection. As an equal. As yours. Roman's smile was slow, genuine, transformative. Then stay. Help us build something better than what we inherited. Help us be more than just criminals operating in the dark. Stay, Ruslan echoed, and let us love you the way you deserve. Fiercely, completely, without reservation. The negotiation, when it happened 2 days later, was anticlimax. The Volkovs arrived desperate and defeated, their financial ruin apparent in every forced smile. Roman and Ruslan presented terms that were generous given the circumstances. The Popovs would acquire the territory, but pay fair value, would absorb the Volkov employees without retribution, would even allow the family to maintain nominal control of their remaining legitimate businesses. Daria watched from the sidelines, no longer just the accountant but the architect of this victory, and realized that power wasn't about violence or fear. It was about knowing exactly where to apply pressure, exactly what people valued most, and using that knowledge strategically. The Volkovs signed. They had no choice. And that night, in Ruslan's apartment, with Roman beside them, Daria made her own choice. She kissed them both, giving herself over to the dangerous, beautiful complexity of loving two men who loved each other, and her with equal intensity. 6 months had become forever, and she'd never been happier. 3 months after the Volkov negotiations, Moscow bloomed into spring, and the Popov Empire bloomed with it. The acquired territories brought new revenue streams, new opportunities, new challenges that required Daria's constant attention. She'd officially been named Chief Financial Officer of Popov Holdings, with a corner office, a salary that made her previous accounting job laughable, an influence that extended far beyond spreadsheets. But the real transformation was personal. Living with Roman and Ruslan had evolved from protective custody to genuine partnership. They'd established rhythms. Sunday mornings belonged to lazy breakfasts that Ruslan cooked while Roman read the newspaper, and Daria worked crossword puzzles. Tuesday evenings were strategy sessions where they planned the week's operations. Fridays, they left work early and explored Moscow together, finding small restaurants or art galleries, pretending for a few hours that they were ordinary people, living ordinary lives. The intimacy between them deepened in ways both expected and surprising. Roman, so controlled in public, was tender and vulnerable in private, sharing fears about leading the family or about being worthy of his father's legacy. Ruslan, playful and warm, had depths of intensity that emerged when he thought they were threatened, a protective streak that bordered on possessive. And Daria found herself becoming someone new, confident, powerful, unafraid to voice opinions or make demands. She'd learned to shoot, could now handle the handgun Ruslan had given her with reasonable proficiency. She'd learned the subtle politics of the Bratva, understood which captains were loyal and which required careful watching. She'd become, in every way that mattered, a Popov. Which was why, on a bright Saturday morning in May, she found herself standing in front of a full-length mirror, wearing a cream silk dress that cost more than her first car, preparing for a wedding that would formalize what her heart had already decided. Her sister Katya adjusted the pearl necklace, their mothers saved for this occasion, and met Daria's eyes in the mirror. "You're sure about this? It's not too late to run. I have a car waiting just in case." Daria laughed, the sound bright and free. "I've never been more sure of anything. You're marrying into the Bratva." Katya's voice was careful, non-judgmental. "Marrying two men, which is legal in exactly 0 countries. Living a life that could get you killed any Tuesday afternoon. And you're happy about this?" "Deliriously," Daria confirmed. She turned from the mirror, taking her sister's hands. "I know how it looks from the outside. I know you're worried. But Roman and Ruslan see me, Katya. All of me. The ambitious parts, the scared parts, the parts that want to change the world through decimal points and spreadsheets. They've given me power, purpose, and love in equal measure. How could I want anything else? Katya pulled her into a hug. Then I'm happy for you. Terrified, but happy. Just promise you'll be careful, that you won't lose yourself in their world. I won't, Daria promised. I'm not losing myself. I'm finding the version of me that's been hiding all along. The ceremony was intimate, held in the Popov family chapel, a small Orthodox church their grandfather had built decades ago. Only trusted family and closest allies attended. Barely 30 people in total. The priest was one who understood the unique nature of this union, who'd agreed to bless a bond that existed outside traditional definitions. Roman waited at the altar, in a perfectly tailored black suit, Ruslan beside him in charcoal gray, whilst they stood close enough that their shoulders touched, united as they had always been, now waiting to complete their circle with her. As Daria walked down the aisle, no father to give her away because she was giving herself freely. She remembered that first night in the restaurant, remembered Roman's cold assessment, Ruslan's dangerous charm, her own terror and fascination. Remembered Roman's warning, never enter my office uninvited. She'd broken that rule eventually, of course, had stormed into his office one memorable afternoon when she discovered evidence of a corrupt city official and needed authorization to freeze his assets immediately. Roman had looked up from his work, ready to reprimand her for the intrusion, and she'd simply said, "Fire me later. Right now, we have a councilman to destroy." He'd laughed instead, who had given her the authorization and a kiss that left her breathless, and reassigned the rule entirely. Now she entered his office whenever she pleased, because she belonged there, belonged with them. The ceremony was short, the vows traditional, with careful modifications. Daria married Roman legally. The paperwork filed with the city that would recognize one husband, even if it couldn't acknowledge two. But the rings, 3 matching platinum bands inscribed with coordinates of the warehouse where they'd had their first real conversation as equals, went on all their fingers. The vows spoken before God, and witnesses bound all 3 of them. I, Roman Popov, take you, Daria Volkov, as my wife, my partner, my equal. I promise to protect you, to honor you, to build a life worthy of your courage. What's mine is yours. What I am is yours. And today and always. I, Ruslan Popov, take you, Daria Volkov, as my wife, my heart, my joy. I promise to make you laugh, to stand beside you, to fight your battles as fiercely as my own. You are home to me. You are everything. Today and always. I, Daria Volkov, take you, Roman and Ruslan Popov, as my husbands, my partners, my family. I promise to challenge you, to support you, to love you with everything I am. We build this life together, equal and unbreakable, today and always. When they kissed, first Daria and Roman, then Daria and Ruslan, and finally all 3 together in a tangle of laughter and tears, the chapel erupted in applause. The Popov captains stood, saluting their new partnership with fists over hearts. Daria's mother, frail but present, wept happy tears, and Katya, despite her fears, smiled with genuine joy. Oh, the reception was held at the headquarters, transformed for the occasion with flowers and lights and tables, groaning with food and vodka. Daria danced with Roman, his movements precise and controlled, then with Ruslan, who spun her wildly and made her dizzy with happiness. She accepted congratulations from men she'd once feared, women who'd become unlikely friends, the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back. But the most important moment came later. when the three of them escaped to the rooftop garden, Ruslan's secret project, a green space he'd cultivated amidst the industrial gray. Under strings of lights and surrounded by blooming roses, they stood together looking out at the city they controlled, the empire they'd built. "I never thought I'd have this," Roman admitted quietly. "A partner who understood the business, who could stand beside me in the darkness and not flinch. Someone who made Ruslan laugh like that, who saw him as more than just my shadow." "I never thought I'd share," Ruslan added with a grin. "Never thought I could. But you make it easy, Daria. Make it feel right." Daria stood between them, their arms around her waist, her hands covering theirs. "I never thought I'd find a place where being too smart, too ambitious, too much was exactly right. Where my skills were weapons, and my mind was valued as much as my heart. You gave me that. Both of you." "We gave each other everything," Roman said, "and we'll protect it. Whatever comes, whoever threatens this, they'll learn what happens when you challenge the pop-offs." It was a promise and a warning, spoken into the spring night. Because their world was still dangerous, and still filled with enemies who saw opportunity in every perceived weakness. But they were stronger together. 3 minds, 3 hearts, 3 different strengths, unified into something unbreakable. The weeks that followed settled into a new normal. Daria officially took Roman's last name, becoming Daria Popova in every legal document, though everyone in the organization knew she belonged to both brothers equally. She expanded her role, not just managing finances, but helping restructure their entire operation. Under her guidance, the Popov family began transitioning their wealth into legitimate enterprises. She established scholarship funds for children in their territories, built community centers, invested in small businesses that created real jobs. It was still a criminal empire at its core, but she was determined to make it evolve, as to build something that could eventually exist in the light. Roman supported her vision, seeing the strategic value in legitimate power. Ruslan threw himself into the charitable work, finding purpose in helping the neighborhoods he'd grown up in. Together, they were building a legacy that extended beyond violence and fear. 6 months after the wedding, Daria discovered she was pregnant. The news came during a routine doctor's visit, unexpected and overwhelming. She sat in the clinic bathroom, staring at the confirmation results, trying to process the magnitude of this change. A child. Their child. She had no idea which brother was the biological father, and she realized immediately that it didn't matter. This baby would belong to all of them, would be raised by 3 parents who loved each other completely. It would grow up knowing its family was different, unusual, but also knowing it was absolutely wanted. She told them that night, nervous despite their bond. They'd never discussed children, had been too focused on surviving, on building, on simply being together. But when she showed them the test results, when she said the words, "I'm pregnant," their reactions erased every fear. Roman went very still, his eyes suspiciously bright. Then he pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for this gift." Ruslan whooped with joy, lifting her carefully off her feet and spinning her in a circle before setting her down and kissing her thoroughly. "We're going to be fathers, both of us, actual fathers. This is Daria. This is everything." They stayed up all night planning, arguing good-naturedly about names and nursery colors, and whether their child would learn business or art or both. They talked about protection, about keeping this baby safe in their dangerous world. They made promises to be better, to build better, to create a future where their child could choose their own path. And in the quiet moments before dawn, when they finally fell asleep in a tangle of limbs and promises, Daria thought about how far she'd come. From the terrified accountant entering that restaurant to the woman she was now. Wife, partner, soon-to-be mother, equal ruler of an empire that was slowly transforming into something worthy of the family they were building. Roman's rule about his office had been the first boundary she'd crossed, but it wouldn't be the last. Together, they would cross every boundary that tried to limit them, would build something unprecedented and powerful and undeniably theirs. The story that had begun with a warning, "Never enter my office uninvited," had become something more. It had become an invitation to a life beyond rules, beyond conventions, beyond everything she'd thought possible. It had become home. It had become love. It had become forever. And Daria Popova, formerly Volkov, accountant turned Bratva queen, wouldn't change a single dangerous, beautiful moment of it. 2 years later, Daria stood in Roman's office, the sacred space that was now as much hers as his, with their daughter Mira balanced on her hip. The little girl had Ruslan's warm brown eyes and Roman's serious expression, and her first word had been numbers, which delighted Daria to no end. Roman looked up from his desk, his stern face melting into softness when he saw them. "She's supposed to be napping." "Tell her that," Daria said, crossing the threshold without hesitation, without permission, because she didn't need it anymore. "She has opinions about sleep schedules, loud ones." Ruslan appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion, and took Mira from Daria's arms. "Come here, little troublemaker. Let's go find those blocks you like, while Mama and Papa finish working." As they left, Daria moved behind Roman's desk, reading over his shoulder. "The Petersburg contract? I thought we decided to pass on that." "We did. I'm drafting the refusal now." Roman pulled her down into his lap. "You were right, as usual. The margins don't justify the risk." Daria kissed him, slow and sweet. "I love it when you admit I'm right." "Then you must love me constantly," Roman murmured against her lips. "Because you're always right." From the doorway, Ruslan's laugh echoed back to them, warm and joyful. Mira's giggle joined it. The sound of their daughter's happiness, the best thing Daria had ever heard. This was the life she'd chosen. Dangerous, unconventional, absolutely perfect. She'd walked into Roman's office uninvited that first day, and every day since, she'd been exactly where she belonged. Ready for more captivating mafia romance stories? Subscribe to our channel for weekly updates featuring powerful love, dangerous choices, and unforgettable characters. Don't forget to like this video and share it with fellow romance readers who love their stories bold, intense, and beautifully complicated. Drop a comment below telling us which moment from Roman, Ruslan, and Daria's story was your favorite. We read every single one. Until next time, keep believing in love that breaks all the rules.